A Su-24M dives low, dodging Russian radar. Chaff and flares erupt, outsmarting a missile in a fiery sky. Storm Shadow missiles slam into bunkers, obliterating Russian command posts in a blaze of fire and collapsing concrete. At Klnitzky Oblast base, ground crew locks 1,300 kilo Storm Shadow missiles onto a Su-24M's wings for a critical mission. Hydraulic jacks hum as technicians check the Su-24M, ensuring its deadly 2,600 kiloton payload is secure for launch. The pilot, focused, receives a silent nod from the crew. Green lights confirm the missile lock for the 850-kilometer flight. The Su-24M roars down the runway, embarking on a dangerous mission into Russian air defense territory. Flying at 50-60 meters, the pilot skims treetops, using terrain-following radar to evade Russian S-300 and S-400 systems. The Storm Shadow's 250-kilometer range forces the pilot to launch from 15-kilometer deep in enemy radar zones. Russian air defenses, layered with S-400 radars, scan the skies, ready to intercept slow-moving Storm Shadow missiles. Ukraine's Hortitsia M system detects unusual Russian data traffic, pinpointing high-ranking officers' communications in Donetsk. Shark drones at 15,000 FT zoom in, confirming Russian commanders at Topaz factory and Donetsk metallurgical plant. T-90 tanks and BMP-3 vehicles amass in Peklo, preparing a massive Russian counteroffensive against Ukrainian lines. Ukrainian intelligence identifies the Russian 41st Army and 20th Division HQs as the brains behind the offensive. Rather than face tanks head-on, Ukraine plans to strike the command centers, paralyzing Russian operations. The Su-24M pilot relies on NATO-integrated ECM to jam Russian radars during the high-risk, low-altitude flight. In Kiev, an underground command center monitors the mission via encrypted satellite, coordinating drones and missiles. UJ-26 Beaver drones swarm at medium altitude, flooding Russian radar with false targets to create chaos. 3 Peklo cruise missiles launch, targeting Russian HQs to sow panic and distract air defenses. 7 Beaver drones aim for radar power supplies, seeking to create a brief blind spot in Russian defenses. A kamikaze drone strikes a radar station, disabling it for seconds, opening a corridor for the Su-24M. The Su-24M speeds through the blind spot, but a Beriev A-50 detects its heat signature from above. Radar lock alarms scream. The pilot slams the chaff flare button, creating a magnesium cloud to mislead missiles. A 48 and N6E missile explodes kilometers away, deceived by the Su-24M's countermeasures in a life-or-death moment. 2 Peklo missiles are shot down by Russian defenses, but one hits Topaz factory's communication tower. The Peklo's 50-kilon warhead shatters the tower, cutting Russian HQ communications and sparking panic inside. Drone shark footage confirms high-ranking officers in both HQs, green-lighting the Storm Shadow launch. The Su-24M pilot, at 15 kilometer, releases 2 Storm Shadow missiles, then dives to escape Russian defenses. The first Storm Shadow plunges into Topaz factory's ventilation shaft, guided by a shark drone's laser. Deep underground, the 450 kilo warhead detonates, obliterating the 41st Army's command staff in seconds. The second Storm Shadow pierces the metallurgical plant's concrete, exploding in the 20th Division's command center. The plant's steel frame collapses in a cloud of fire, smoke, and dust, burying the Russian HQ. Spetsnaz and FSB cordon off both sites, hiding the disaster as sirens wail through the night. Ambulances and heavy machinery work under floodlights, revealing the attack's devastating scale despite Russian secrecy. Without HQs, Russian artillery fires blindly, unable to coordinate with drones or forward observers. Logistics convoys stall, leaving T-90 tanks and BMP-3s without fuel or ammunition, stranded in depots. Russian commanders, shaken, scatter into smaller units, reducing coordination and operational efficiency. FSB launches internal probes, suspecting betrayal, further eroding morale among Russian ranks. Ukraine seizes the moment, launching a counteroffensive in Donbass with drones and artillery unrestricted. Ukrainian special forces exploit gaps, raiding Russian rear lines and cutting supply routes. The command vacuum shifts Donbass from static trench warfare to dynamic Ukrainian maneuver operations. Russian troops, leaderless, fail to respond, allowing Ukraine to dictate the battlefield's pace and flow. The attack's shockwave ripples through Russian forces, shattering confidence in rear line safety. Ukrainian drones and artillery dominate, striking targets once protected by Russian counterfire. Small Ukrainian assault groups infiltrate, turning defensive gaps into strategic victories. Advances that took months now unfold in days, as Ukraine exploits Russian disarray. Technology and intelligence triumph over brute force, redefining modern warfare in Ukraine's favor. Subscribe to explore more strategies, human stories, and tactical analyses of this ongoing conflict. A technician inspects the Su-24M's cockpit instruments, ensuring functionality for the high-stakes mission ahead. Ground crew secures the Storm Shadow missiles, their 450-kilo warheads gleaming under hangar lights. The pilot climbs into the Su-24M, adjusting his helmet, ready for the perilous flight into enemy territory. Engines roar as the Su-24M taxis, its wings heavy with the 2,600 killing payload for Donetsk. The runway blurs as the Su-24M accelerates, lifting off into the darkening Ukrainian sky. At 50 meters, the pilot hugs the terrain, treetops brushing close to the cockpit's canopy. Digital maps on the Su-24M's display guide the pilot through valleys, evading Russian radar detection. Hortitsia M operators in a dimly lit room analyze Russian data traffic, pinpointing command frequencies. A Shark drone's camera zooms in, capturing Russian officers entering the Topaz factory's bunker. Another Shark drone surveys the Donetsk metallurgical plant, confirming 20th Division's HQ activity. T-90 tanks roll into position in Peklo, their turrets glinting under the overcast sky. BMP-3 vehicles line up, their crews preparing for the planned Russian offensive in Donbass. Ukrainian analysts in Kiev review drone footage, marking the two HQs as primary strike targets. The Ukrainian strategy unfolds. Destroy the command structure to halt the Russian armored advance. Russian S-400 radar dishes rotate, scanning for threats as the Su-24M approaches Donetsk. The Storm Shadow's subsonic speed demands a close launch, risking the pilot's life in enemy airspace. In Kiev's command center, officers track the Su-24M's icon on a giant screen, tense with anticipation. UJ-126 Beaver drones launch from secret Ukrainian bases, their engines buzzing in the night sky. Ram-2 kamikaze drones swarm, cluttering Russian radar with false signatures to overwhelm operators. Peklo missiles streak toward Donetsk, their jet engines glowing in the darkness of the battlefield. A Beaver drone dives, striking a Russian radar's power cabinet, sparking a brief electrical failure. Another Beaver hits a command vehicle, its explosion lighting up the night near Topaz factory. The Su-24M's radar warning screams as the Bereve-50 locks onto its heat signature. Chaff bursts from the Su-24M, scattering metal clouds to confuse incoming Russian missiles. Flares ignite, creating a blazing trail as the pilot maneuvers to escape the S-400's lock. The 48 N-6E missile detonates in a fireball, missing the Su-24M by kilometers in the sky. A Peklo missile is intercepted, exploding mid-air as Russian defenses react to the swarm. Another Peklo falls to a Pantsir system, its wreckage scattering over Donetsk's outskirts. The third Peklo slams into Topaz's communication tower, collapsing it in a shower of sparks. Inside Topaz, Russian officers scramble to shelters as alarms blare and communications fail. Shark drones hover, their lasers painting the Topaz bunker for the incoming Storm Shadow strike. The Su-24M pilot at 15 km confirms the target lock and releases the first Storm Shadow. The second Storm Shadow detaches, gliding silently toward the metallurgical plant's command center. The pilot banks sharply, pushing the Su-24M to its limits, skimming treetops to escape. The first Storm Shadow dives into the Topaz bunker's ventilation shaft, guided by precise laser targeting. The 450-kilo warhead explodes underground, shredding the 41st Army's command room in seconds. The second Storm Shadow pierces the metallurgical plant, its broach warhead detonating in the core. The plant's structure collapses, fire and smoke billowing as the 20th Division's HQ is destroyed. Spetsnaz units rush to seal off the Topaz factory, their vehicles blocking all access roads. FSB agents cordon the metallurgical plant, their faces grim under the glow of emergency lights. Ambulances race through Donetsk, their sirens echoing as debris removal begins under floodlights. Heavy machinery rumbles, clearing rubble from the destroyed HQs under strict Russian secrecy. Russian artillery without HQ guidance fires random shots, missing Ukrainian targets in Donbass. T-90 tanks sit idle in depots, their crews waiting for orders that never arrive. BMP-3 vehicles, stranded without fuel, become useless hulks in the Russian rear lines. Russian commanders relocate to smaller units, their movements erratic to avoid further strikes. FSB investigators question officers, suspecting leaks that led to the devastating Ukrainian attack. Morale plummets as Russian troops lose trust in their command structure's safety and reliability. Ukrainian drones swarm freely, striking Russian positions without fear of coordinated counterfire. Ukrainian artillery pounds targets, exploiting the chaos in Russian command and control systems. Special forces infiltrate Russian lines, cutting supply routes with precise, small-scale raids. Ukrainian mobile groups exploit gaps, turning defensive weaknesses into tactical victories. The Donbass front shifts, with Ukraine dictating the tempo of a dynamic maneuver war. Russian defenses crumble as units operate without centralized orders or intelligence support. Ukrainian advances accelerate, capturing ground once heavily defended by Russian forces. The attack's psychological impact lingers, with Russian officers paranoid about further strikes. Russian command meetings shorten, decisions delayed by fear of Ukrainian intelligence leaks. The FSB's witch hunt deepens, sowing distrust and slowing Russian operational responses. Ukraine's counteroffensive gains momentum, with drones dominating the skies over Donbass. Ukrainian artillery strikes with precision, unhindered by Russian counter-battery fire. Special forces raid a Russian supply depot, destroying fuel reserves in a fiery explosion. Ukrainian armored units advance, exploiting gaps left by leaderless Russian troops. The Donbass battlefield transforms, with Ukraine seizing control of key strategic points. Russian logistics collapse, with supply convoys stalled and unable to support the front. The destruction of HQs leaves Russian artillery blind, unable to target Ukrainian movements. Ukrainian drones relay real-time data, guiding artillery to devastate Russian positions. The command vacuum allows Ukraine to launch rapid, coordinated strikes across Donbass. Russian troops, isolated, retreat from exposed positions, leaving gaps in their lines. Ukrainian special forces operate behind lines, disrupting Russian communications further. The metallurgical plant's ruins smolder, a testament to the storm shadow's devastating power. Topaz factory's bunker, now rubble, symbolizes the collapse of Russian command in Donetsk. Russian soldiers, leaderless, struggle to coordinate defenses against Ukrainian advances. Ukrainian artillery shells rain down, exploiting the lack of Russian counterfire coordination. A Ukrainian drone captures footage of abandoned T-90 tanks, useless without fuel or orders. The Donbass front sees Ukrainian units moving freely, unopposed by disorganized Russian forces. Russian commanders, scattered, struggle to regain control over their fragmented units. The FSB's investigations deepen paranoia, with officers fearing betrayal at every level. Ukrainian mobile groups strike supply lines, cutting off Russian reinforcements in Donbass. The battlefield shifts to Ukraine's advantage, with rapid gains in previously contested areas. Russian artillery, once dominant, now fires sporadically, unable to pinpoint Ukrainian targets. Ukrainian drones swarm, relaying coordinates for precise artillery strikes on Russian positions. The command paralysis cripples Russian logistics, leaving vehicles stranded across Donbass. Ukrainian special forces raid a Russian outpost, destroying equipment in a swift attack. The Donbass front becomes a hunting ground for Ukrainian artillery and drone teams. Russian troops without orders abandon positions, leaving equipment behind in retreat. Ukrainian armored units push forward, capturing key terrain in the Donbass region. The storm shadow strikes reshape the war, proving precision over brute force in combat. Russian morale crumbles as soldiers feel exposed without command or logistical support. Ukrainian drones dominate, providing real-time intelligence for coordinated ground assaults. The Donbass battlefield sees Ukraine dictating the pace, exploiting Russian disarray. Russian command elements scatter further, their coordination fractured by the attack's impact. Ukrainian artillery exploits the chaos, hammering Russian positions with unopposed barrages. Special forces strike a Russian fuel depot, igniting it in a massive fireball. Ukrainian units advance, filling gaps left by retreating Russian troops in Donbass. The command vacuum leaves Russian artillery ineffective, unable to counter Ukrainian strikes. Ukrainian drones relay footage of Russian vehicles abandoned in the chaos of retreat. The Donbass front transforms, with Ukraine gaining ground through rapid maneuver tactics. Russian commanders, paranoid, avoid fixed HQs, reducing their ability to coordinate effectively. Ukrainian special forces disrupt Russian supply lines, isolating frontline units further. The Storm Shadow strikes mark a turning point, showcasing Ukraine's strategic precision. Russian troops, leaderless, struggle to hold positions against Ukrainian mobile assaults. Ukrainian artillery dominates, striking targets with precision thanks to drone intelligence. The Donbass battlefield sees Ukraine's forces exploiting every Russian weakness rapidly.